An Indonesian man became an instant millionaire when a meteorite worth $2 million crashed into his home. The rock is an extremely rare variety that's estimated to be around 4.5 billion years old. In 2013, PayPal accidentally credited $93 quadrillion to Pennsylvania man Chris Reynolds. Unfortunately, he didn't withdraw it before they noticed the error, making him the richest man in the history of the world for only a few minutes. In 1998, Philip Ozerski was attending a Cardinals baseball game at Busch Stadium in St. Louis. It would turn out to be the game where Mark McGwire hit his record-setting 70th home run of the season, and Philip caught the ball. But since McGwire refused to meet him, Ozerski didn't give the ball back. Instead, he later sold it at auction for around $3 million. When a Filipino fisherman's anchor got stuck on a rock, he decided to take it home with him as a good luck charm. He kept it under his bed for 10 years until his house burned down in a fire. He soon found out that it was actually the largest pearl ever found, valued at right around $100 million. While filming the final scene of the movie Kingpin, where Bill Murray's character bowls 3 strikes in a row, Bill Murray actually did bowl 3 strikes in a row. His celebration along with the crowd's roaring applause were both genuine reactions. Enzo Ferrari, the founder of the Ferrari company, died on August 14, 1988. Just 1 month later, on October 15th, Arsenal soccer player Mesut Ozil was born. Famous Austrian composer and painter Arnold Schoenberg had extreme triskaidekaphobia, a fear of the number 13. He ended up dying on Friday the 13th at the age of 76. 7 plus 6 equals 13. In 1913, a 12-year-old black girl named Sarah Rector was given land deemed unsuitable for farming. But it turned out to be rich with oil, and she became a millionaire overnight. She was known as the richest colored girl in the world, and Oklahoma legislation even made an effort to have her legally declared white. Actor Mickey Rourke was a heartthrob of the 1980s until he quit his acting career to become a boxer. After multiple facial injuries and botched plastic surgeries, he now looks like he's wearing a mask of someone else's face. United Airlines has repeatedly killed more pets per year than any other airline by far. When Japan executes criminals by hanging, 3 different buttons on the wall are pressed by 3 different people at the same time. This is so that none of them know who actually did the killing, since only one button is randomly programmed to open the trap door. In 2016, Mark Hamill paid a visit to a dying Star Wars fan in the hospital. He then proceeded to answer every question as Luke Skywalker, since the fan could no longer distinguish between reality and fiction. If you ever see a kangaroo standing in the water like this, you should get out of there immediately. He's likely waiting for a pursuer to join him in the water so that he can drown it. It was developed as a defense mechanism against dingoes, but has been performed on innocent household dogs. Here's a photo of anti-war demonstrators protesting outside the 1968 DNC in Chicago. Shirtless protester Frank Plata was later drafted by the U.S. Army and killed in the Vietnam War. Last summer, an 88-year-old Frenchman caused an entire hospital to be evacuated for the strangest of reasons. He had a shell from World War I stuck inside of his anus, which was considered a bomb threat, and a defusing team was called in. They determined the shell was not at risk of exploding, and it was surgically removed by doctors. In Houston, Texas, a 19-year-old man named Rashad died while attempting to play Russian roulette in front of his friends. He apparently didn't know how the game worked, since he tried to use a semi-automatic pistol instead of a revolver. In 1976, a Greek man named Stomatis Moridis was diagnosed with lung cancer and told that he had less than a year to live. But 10 years later, he returned to the doctors to tell them that he was still alive, only to find out that he had outlived all of them. He passed away in 2013 at the age of 102. The oldest known photograph of a person was taken in 1838. It only happened because a man and his shoe shiner were the only people still enough on a busy street to show up in the 10-minute exposure. The earliest known sunglasses were created by Inuit hunters around 2,000 years ago. They were made to shield their eyes from the blinding glare of sunlight that reflected off the snow. Found on an ancient Greek colony along the Nile River, the oldest known pair of socks are 1,600 years old. They're made from red wool and were designed to be worn with sandals. This 3,200-year-old ancient Egyptian tablet is considered to be the oldest attendance sheet in the world. Reasons for workers being absent included brewing beer, embalming brother, and bitten by scorpion. Dating back to 1504, this carved ostrich egg is the oldest known depiction of the New World. The globe shows North America as an unnamed group of scattered islands. There are depictions of ships and monsters, and it even contains the phrase Hic sunt draconis, which literally translates to "Here lies dragons." According to his former doctor, Michael Jackson's father chemically castrated him when he was a young boy. He reportedly did this so that Michael would maintain his high-pitched singing voice into adulthood. Princess Diana didn't die immediately at the scene of her car accident, but instead died 5 hours later due to a tear in the pulmonary vein of her heart. She would have had an 80% chance of surviving the crash if she had just been wearing her seatbelt. Located in Paris, this is the tomb of legendary scientist Marie Curie. It's lined with an inch thick of lead since her remains are still radioactive to this day. The skin of certain fish species can be grafted onto severe burns and diabetic wounds. The material recruits the body's own cells and is eventually converted into living tissue. According to a recent study, people in the US who were born before 1996 have a lower IQ than those born afterwards. This is due to the negative effects of leaded gasoline, which was finally banned completely on January 1st, 1996. In the late 1980s, a woman went on a vacation getaway where singles could meet other singles. She quickly thought she met the man of her dreams and decided to sleep with him that night. But when she woke up in the hotel room the next morning, the man was gone and there was a small wooden coffin on the table next to her. Inside was a note that read, "You are now HIV positive." In 2009, spelunker John Jones was caving with some friends and family in the Nutty Putty Cave in Utah. About an hour into the expedition, John decided to find the route known as the Birth Canal, a notoriously narrow passage that spelunkers must crawl through carefully if they dare. After finding what he thought was the birth canal, he crawled in head first and started inching his way forward. But John would soon realize that this wasn't the birth canal, since it was clearly way tighter than anything safe to crawl through. The problem was, by this point, he didn't even have enough space to wiggle back out the way he came. So his only option was to continue pushing forward. 4 hours later, John's brother had located him and returned with men and supplies to help get him out. But over the next 27 hours, rescuers desperately failed to pull John out of the crevice. And at some point, he likely died from cardiac arrest due to being unable to breathe. John's body was never retrieved, and the cave has since been sealed off forever. Following the radiation leak, there were an estimated 150,000 abortions across Eastern Europe due to radiophobia. Many parents didn't want their babies to be born with mutations, even though the risk for most was quite low. Vasily Ignatenko was one of the first firemen to respond to the nuclear leak. After being exposed, he suffered in constant excruciating pain for 18 days before dying. Local ranchers noticed a dramatic increase in the genetic mutations of their animals following the leak. Some of the abnormalities included extra limbs and body parts in the wrong locations. It's been more than 4 decades since the Chernobyl accident, but experts estimate that Pripyat will remain uninhabitable for another 20,000 years. In 2014, an Australian vet performed a 45-minute surgery on a pet goldfish named George. His owners were apparently quite attached to him, so they paid to have a tumor removed from his head. The surgery went swimmingly, and George made a full recovery. In 1998, American father John Crowley was told that his 2 babies were born with an incurable disorder that would kill them within less than a year. But John refused to accept this, so he launched his own biotech company without any prior experience in the field. The company would go on to create an experimental enzyme therapy that saved the lives of his kids and many others. 25 years later, both of his children are still alive to this day. Gay male concentration camp prisoners were given an upside-down pink triangle to signify their homosexuality. Because of this, many of them were still considered criminals after being rescued and were often sent back to prison to serve out their terms. Many Holocaust survivors were too weak to digest food after being rescued. As a result, half of the survivors from Auschwitz died within a few days of being liberated. Towards the end of the war, future President Dwight Eisenhower predicted that people would try to deny that the Holocaust ever happened. So he ordered his men to take as many graphic photos as possible to prevent this from happening. Before World War II, a gentleman named Janusz Korczak ran an orphanage in Warsaw. During the Holocaust, Nazi soldiers came to his orphanage to take all 192 children to an extermination camp. Korczak was offered his freedom but refused to abandon the children. Instead, he boarded the train with them and was never seen nor heard from again. When Eminem relapsed in 2008, he went to Elton John asking for advice on how to handle the superstar lifestyle. Elton ended up calling him every day for the next 18 months and became a significant part of his recovery. When disabled man Alan Parton was suddenly hit by a car, his service dog Endel immediately dragged him into the recovery position. The dog then pushed his cell phone into his hand, put a blanket over him, and ran over to a nearby hospital and barked until somebody helped him. Before it came out in theaters, it was a 10-year-old girl's last dying wish to see the movie Up. So a representative from Pixar flew to her home with a DVD copy, and she died 7 hours after watching the film. For 20 straight years, a male stork named Klepeton migrated over 5,000 miles every year to be with his partner Milena, who lost the ability to fly after being shot by a hunter. They would spend every mating season together and ended up having over 40 chicks in total. Male genital transplant surgeons typically exclude the testicles when performing a transplant. This is because the deceased donor would become the biological father of any future babies produced by that nutsack. Mississippi didn't make it illegal to sell a child until 2009, when a woman tried to sell her 2-week-old grandson on Craigslist for $2,000. She couldn't be prosecuted since there wasn't currently a law to punish her under. This photo shows Jason Vukovich smiling at his brother after being sentenced to 28 years in prison. Vukovich would track down registered before assaulting and robbing them. The FBI revealed that in 2003, a man told Kobe Bryant he would make his SA accuser disappear for $3 million. Kobe reported the letter to the FBI and the man was sent to prison. The well-endowed man behind this iconic image is none other than Wardy Joubert III. He was a football coach and preacher who sadly died in 2016 at the age of 45 from a heart attack. In 1961, son of U.S. Vice President Nelson Rockefeller went missing during an expedition in Papua New Guinea. Although he was legally declared dead in 1964, some say this was him as part of a cannibalistic tribe in 1969. In 1967, Soviet cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov became the first person to die in space. His craft had over 200 known flaws, but his attempts to delay the launch were rejected. Certain that he would die, Vladimir specifically asked the authorities to give him an open casket funeral after the mission. In Hocus Pocus, Sarah Jessica Parker played a witch who was executed during the Salem witch trials. Years later, the actress discovered that her 10th great-grandmother was actually accused of witchcraft in Salem 1692. For the first half of his life, Hungarian man Adam Rayner was barely 4 feet tall as a result of dwarfism. But during his 20s, a pituitary tumor caused a dramatic growth spurt, and by age 33, he was 7'2". He's the only person in recorded history to have been both a dwarf and a giant.